So you're an adventure racer, maybe you're doing swim run, or maybe even tackling the great swim run world championships. What a great sport this is. I've been involved with swim runs specifically since around about 2016 when I did my first on the Isles of Scilly off the southwest coast of England, and I will never forget that competition. It was amazing. The whole idea of being super innovative, to be able to sort of swim with your shoes on, run with your wetsuit on, towing your mate with a tow float and pulling him along through the water, and then he's towing you up the mountain with the on the running. It's just awesome. And the whole idea of being out in the open airs and just actually really getting at one with nature and adventuring, well, it just suited me down to the ground. I just wish I could say that my running legs felt the same way. Since that day in 2016, I've done many swim run adventure races, and some of my favourites have been obviously the Isles of Scilly, as I mentioned there, but I've also done a race around the Rottnest Island, which was a very sandy course, really hard for the running. I've also been over to Bali to actually raise awareness of plastics in the ocean. That was a fantastic race, running alongside world champion Annika Eriksson, who's won the Attilo World Championships many times. They just managed to beat us at the end, but it was a fantastic day over there in Bali, absolutely amazing. And obviously going and doing other races around the place as well. So if you are getting into adventure racing, specifically swim run, let me now share you my 4 tips to help you with your swim run challenge. Tip number 1 then is all about utilising a pull buoy. Now, when many people get into swim runs specifically, they're not quite sure about whether or not they should carry a pull buoy with them. Many people think surely that's quite cumbersome, and I know certainly I did when I started to utilise it. However, what I did was, being the swim geek that I am, I started monitoring things like heart rate. And I remember many years ago, probably when I was about 13 or 14, I built up for a 1500 meter pool swimming event in France, which I thought, oh, I'm going to really smash this. And what I did was I spent about 6 months training almost exclusively with the pull buoy. And I remember getting to the event thinking, oh, I'm really strong here, feel fantastic. Dived in, went way too fast in that first 100 meters, completely blew my doors off. And because I hadn't done any training with my legs at all, I'd really deconditioned myself such that my heart rate went absolutely through the roof, even with a very steady 2-beat kick, which is what I normally swim with. So the interesting thing was, when I got into swim run, I started looking at this idea of utilising seemingly cumbersome pull buoy, but then actually cross-referencing it with my heart rate whilst I was actually utilising the pull buoy. And I found that in many cases, my heart rate can be a good 40 or 45 beats per minute lower with the pull buoy between the legs than without it. And that's before you even take into account the crazy amount of drag that your shoes create when you're doing your swim run challenge. So I would highly recommend, even if you're one of those people who in the pool don't find the pull buoy gives you any assistance because you're already sitting really high in the water, what the pull buoy will do for everybody in swim run, it will help to offset some of that drag created by your trainers. Now, don't just let your legs dangle there aimlessly. Make sure you point your toes, turn your big toes in, and almost rest the big toes one on top of each other, just to keep that really nice streamlined profile. But definitely consider utilizing a pull buoy. And I've got another little tip on that just coming up in a moment. So tip number 2 is to make sure that you vary your stroke. Now, many of the world's best open water swimmers and triathletes tend to swim with a very seemingly ungainly stroke. I call it the swinger style. Their arm comes up and over the top of the water with a much straighter arm recovery. It gives people much better clearance in the open water, but specifically with respect to swim run, what it's also going to do is, when you're wearing a wetsuit, and generally speaking, swim run wetsuits aren't the most flexible. They're certainly not as flexible as many triathlon wetsuits on the market, especially around the shoulders, especially because you might have all these zippers in all different places to hold your gels, etc. You tend to feel quite stiff. And if you're trying to swim with a classic high elbow when wearing one of those suits, your shoulders are going to get fatigued very quickly indeed. So vary up your stroke a little bit. Be free and feel comfortable swinging, baby, over the top of the water with that straighter arm recovery, and your shoulders specifically will really thank you for it. Tip number 3 when it comes to swim run is should you or shouldn't you use paddles? You've probably seen these guys and girls at the Attilo World Championships, or should I say Attilo World Championships, utilizing massive paddles. Now, this takes a lot of development over time, and I remember doing my first Attilo in 2016 on the Isles of Scilly and thinking to myself, I've got 10 Ks of swimming to do here with the paddles on. Should I utilize a pair of paddles or not? Now, on that particular event, given it was my first, I went without the paddles, and I'm actually really quite glad that I did. I didn't feel like I needed it. As I've got more and more into adventure racing and swim run specifically, so too have I almost started to increase the size of the paddles that I've been utilizing. And I really make a decision on this based on how far is the cumulative swimming distance. If it's not very far, I probably forego utilizing the paddles. If it's somewhere in the mid-range, then I'll utilize the paddles to give me that little bit of an extra advantage. But if it's a really long swimming event, I need to be very, very careful about utilizing something that's really big and it's going to fatigue my shoulders over time. So that's my third tip on utilizing paddles, not necessarily for everybody. And my final tip on improving your swim run, your adventure racing, is go big or go home. And I mean really big. Check out this bad boy. The official rules state that you can actually utilize something of buoyancy of 1 meter squared. Well, these here are the Hoob Big Boy, and there's actually 2 of them glued together. So I wear this on my quad, and then when I'm swimming, I'll actually rotate it through in between the legs to give me that extra little bit of lift. It's actually very, very light foam, so it's not really very cumbersome at all, despite its monstrous size. But this has helped me massively in all of those swim run events that I've done. And I would strongly suggest that you utilize that maximum amount of flotation, even if you consider yourself to be somebody who's naturally very buoyant in the pool. Because don't forget, what you're trying to do is you're trying to offset that drag that those trainers create. And at my very, very best, I'm still swimming around about 12 seconds per 100 slower by wearing the shoes, given how much they dorsiflex my ankles when I'm kicking and create that extra drag. So there are my 4 tips on improving your swim, run and adventure racing. Do please check out some of our swim run specific training programs, and even just consider joining us with our virtual swim program. You'll be glad you did. Thanks for watching.